Hey everybody, Reverend Terry here with Unity of Olympia. I'm so excited to be presenting Sandy Crowell as our presenter of the Grandeur of Egypt. The other accompanying facilitated presentation by Sandy is already on our website. It's called, something about Israel. What was it called, Sandy?
Whispers of the Mideast, I think was that one.
That was it. Whispers of the Mideast. And so thank you, Sandy, for being willing to do this for our community. And of course, if you guys would like to make any financial donation in a conscious contribution for what you receive here today, you can do that online and just put a little note in there that it says that it's about the presentation from Sandy. All right, take it away.
Well, thank you, Reverend Terry. I'm just so honored to get to do this. It's, you know, you have these experiences and then they just sort of lie dormant. But it means so much more if you can share them and go back through things and add and remember things. So I just really appreciate getting to do this. So I'm going to share screen here and go ahead and get started with what I need to do here. Host disabled participant screen sharing, it tells me. Ms. Host, will you share my screen?
I would be so glad to do that. I apologize for not doing that earlier. Here we go. All right, you're in.
Okay, yes. Can you see my screen or am I on?
We're still just looking at you, darling.
Okay. Let me see here. Make sure let me try this. Can you see me now?
We see you, but no PowerPoint.
Okay, let me, am I there yet?
No. I'm gonna pause the recording. All right, Sandy Crowell.
Again, thank you. And this is the second of 2 talks that I've given, Whispers of the Middle East. The Middle East is so fascinating because of all the history that goes back centuries and centuries, but also because of the convergence of so many different faiths. I was very fortunate to go with my travel partner right before the pandemic in December of 2019 to, okay. Are we there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. To Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. We were gone 19 days. And we got just a marvelous taste of, and I say just a taste and really just a whisper of all of those countries have to offer. I'm going to share, first of all, just a glimpse of the country of Jordan. And this is a screenshot of what Jordan looks like. And you can see it's very, very hilly. But the main thing is that we wanted to see Petra, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and among the 7 wonders of the world. And I'm going to paint you just a little word picture here. If you can imagine a very narrow canyon called a Sikh, and if you look way up, you can see bright blue sky, but the canyon itself is rose-colored, multi-layered rock, and it's only maybe 20, 30, 40 feet wide. And you have to be very careful because there is the sharp staccato of horses who are pulling carriages to see the World Heritage Site. This was a trade route to the Silk Road, and it was undiscovered until 1820. It was popular or thriving 300 years before the time of Christ.
Wow.
So just imagine this. You're walking down this narrow path. You see the horses and hear them, and you get a glimpse of this amazing structure. This is the treasury of Petra. It was carved down from rock. It's an entire rock structure. And what amazed me was the influence of Greek architecture. It just seemed so strange to see these columns and the design of this amazing structure. And the whole area, the Rose City, there are tombs, there are structures, the amphitheater, incredible sight. One of those things that you see once in a lifetime. And we were one of a million visitors that go there per year. So as we left Jordan, we were only there a short time. And one of the things that I didn't get a picture of were the Bodwin, I'm not saying that right, Bodwin people who do inhabit this area, and they were recognizable. We saw them with dark coal around their eyes and working somewhat in the tourist industry, but many of them still traveling nomad existence. So we had quite an adventure getting from Jordan into Egypt, and it was something like a movie. I'd like to tell you that story. We left Jordan, but had to cross through 7 different check stations through Israel to get into Egypt. And it was a long hike. We had to carry our own luggage through all of these check stations. We arrived at a station in Egypt, and it was dark. There was one other person, there was another American and us in this station, but the station master didn't speak any English. He was Arabic. And we waited in the dark in this cold station. And a stranger came up to us and asked our name, and we got into the car with who was going to be our tour guide for 4 days and a driver. Well, we sped through the Sinai desert in the dark in a car with 2 complete strangers in the middle of the night. we sort of looked at each other and thought, this is like a movie. Are they going to be ransoming us and sending ransom notes to our children, rescuing us? And we ended up in the place where, well, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. First, I'm going to give you a little background on Egypt. So here we were in Egypt, and understanding that Egypt is in Africa, which, I mean, of course, most people, I guess, realize that, but our tour guide greeted us with, welcome to Africa. And this is where we stayed that night, in a very cold stone motel, really is what it was. But this was the plain in the Sinai where the Jews had stayed for 40 years after their escape from Egypt. And you know, when you think about the history of something like that, it's just pretty incredible. And in the morning we were okay, but at night it was very weird. As we were traveling, we passed through numerous check stations, security points in Egypt on the highway, and the guards everywhere, lots and lots of security guards. But our driver would say in Arabic, whatever, but there was always the word Americans, and we were always sent right through. So that told us that being Americans in Egypt was a pretty safe deal, because obviously they were they won our tourism dollars, but also they want to share their heritage and their history. this was the site of, this is Mount Sinai, and this was the site where Moses supposedly saw the burning bush and got the word from God that he was to lead his people out of Israel, or out of Egypt, to the land of milk and honey, which was Israel. So it was at this spot, the site of St. Catherine's Monastery. And it was such a beautiful morning and so clear and such an awesome sight. I had this epiphany that, you know, if I'm doing all this and having this amazing experience, we need to give something back to the world. So these were the two boys that were out feeding their camel and their caftans. And St. Catherine's Monastery was inhabited by a nice little black kitty. And the camel was having his breakfast. As we were going along, we learned a lot about Egypt. Now, in the United States, we think of upper being north. We're in the upper part of the United States, and lower being south. Well, Lower Egypt is actually north. Upper Egypt is south, based on how the Nile flows. So we spent most of the day traveling to Cairo from the Sinai, and we crossed the Suez Canal, not over it, but under it in a tunnel. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Suez Canal because that has been in the news recently. So it was just, it was kind of a good day because it gave us a little time to orient ourselves that we weren't actually being captured by strangers on the Sinai. Just a little background about Egypt, which is not an easy thing to do. I have to confess to being, first of all, a little intimidated by all of the Egyptian names, all the pharaohs, all the numerous gods. And at some point I even had to ask, now, is that a mythical character? Is that one of the gods, or is that a real leader or whatever? Because it's very complex. When you think that there are 32 different dynasties in ancient Egypt, and those dynasties may consist of 200 or 300 years and numerous families. So that in itself is highly complex. And then you add 2,000 deities. You think we Christians have a hard time understanding God? Well, just imagine if we had to go through 2,000 deities as part of our worship. So this is just a basic outline of a few things, but one of the things about Egypt that it was conquered numerous times. The Assyrians, the Persians, Alexander the Great, the Byzantine Empire, the Arabs, Ottoman Empire, Napoleon, and then British finally. The British were there for quite some time, and they didn't recognize the Egyptian independence until 1922. Then if you look in more recent history, the Arab Spring was in 2011 when Mubarak was overthrown as president. And the new president is Fattah al-Sisi. Our tour guide was very partial to him. He really liked all the things that al-Sisi is doing for Egypt. The next day, we were on to Giza, which of course, I mean, this is the most major thing ever. This is the most traditional part of Egypt that everyone sees, is this amazing pyramid. And this is where I personally was just struck with when I said the grandeur of Egypt, the size of it. Oh my gosh. The pyramid of Giza is approximately 49 stories tall. Each of these blocks that you see me sitting on weigh between 2 and 80 tons. So I think I compare it to the size of a car, and that's about 2 tons. So if one block is 80, you can imagine the heft of that. The Giza pyramid was built by some 2,000 workers, and they were not slaves, they were paid. They were paid workers, and it took them about 20 years. It's still mysterious. It's one of the great mysteries of all time, how the pyramids were put together. And our guide personally, he thought it was a kind of an air compression thing, but they are so tight that neither earthquakes nor weather nor anything has disrupted those for close to 5,000 years. That too is part of the grandeur of Egypt, that immense time and antiquities. Still shaking my head over that. We went on to the Sphinx, which is another one that's, of course, you know, it's almost iconic of Egypt. And the Sphinx, if you'll look in this picture that we got, you can see on the top of it a little bird. And we like that picture. We were told that while the Sphinx was thought to be guarding the Great Pyramid, it actually, some of the latest Egyptologists are dating it back to maybe even older, based on the rock, studying the rock that it's carved of. This is a face of a woman and a body of a lion. And just, again, everybody knows about the Sphinx, even Las Vegas, where they've made a copy. So the step pyramid we saw at that same day, and it is the oldest pyramid. It's just a mere 4,700 years old. Drop in the bucket, huh? Now, we did some fun things. You know, when you're traveling, you do some of the silly things. My friend and travel companion, Bill, went for a camel ride and went Yahoo! And we all had a lot of laughs. And then an Arab man put one of their traditional headgear on me for a photo. And of course, he thought it would probably be a good idea if we paid him for the photo. But anyway, later I was thinking, I wonder how many people have had that on their head. I'm not so sure I would have done it if I thought of that beforehand, but anyway, lots of fun. And some wonderful food. This was one of our best meals, served in a steaming hot thermidor on our table and it was lamb and chicken and falafel. We had a lot of falafel various times. So one of the things that we did was visit a place that was selling papyrus, and papyrus dates back another millennium, back to, I think it was 3100 BC, as a form of paper. And on the left, you'll see the print that I got, which is the tree of life, and then the Sphinx and Nefertiti on the right. And so a couple of weeks ago, I had the lights all turned out, and here is what I discovered under my tree of life print. A cat. And I hadn't known that was there, but cats were such traditional, not only as pets, but they were considered godlike, and the pharaohs had them. They even had mills, almost like what we think of puppy mills, people who are, you know, where they're raising cats and selling cats and people mummifying cats. Not long ago, they discovered a mummified, not a big cat, but a kitten in somebody's grave. So cats were a very big deal. They were thought to be godlike. The museum, we here know of King Tut and how we've seen the displays in Seattle, but you know, when you see the real, not that those weren't the real things, but to understand the history of that King Tut was not nearly as prominent a king as we have been led to believe, but how a young boy happened to be out walking and realized there was a hole and kind of peeked inside, and inside was just this treasure trove of gold and wealth. And we met I think the grandson of the boy who had discovered King Tut's tomb. And we did see the actual tomb itself at later on. The museum now has been, in the time that since we were there is a new museum built by President Sisi to house all the Egyptian antiquities. And I'm sure that is quite a sight to behold. We went to the site of where Jesus and Mary, where the Holy Family fled to Egypt when Jesus was an infant, and King Herod was going to put all Jewish babies to death, baby boys. So the Holy Family fled to Egypt. And this was the spot where they were, and it was also, they think, the spot where Moses was found due to the changing path of the Nile, where baby Moses was found in the basket in the rushes. And of course, it's all filled in now and not a part of that, and how they can know that is something else. So the Coptic religion is the oldest Christian faith, and I still am kind of wrestling with trying to decide why it has something to do with how they interpreted the being of Jesus. So it's similar in some beliefs to Catholicism, but a different idea of what Jesus is or was. And interestingly enough, there are symbols, even though that was much later, on many of the antiquities, there are symbols of the Coptic faith that came along much later. People would go to these ancient temples and carve in the Coptic symbol into the walls. So when I talk about the difference in faith, there are, well, first of all, Egypt is primarily a Muslim country. In the hotels where we stayed, we had this large hotel in Cairo had a big breakfast room where we would go to eat. And I was the only woman in the place without my hair covered. And so, and when we went to this mosque, I had a scarf thinking I would need both to take off my shoes and cover my head. And I didn't have to do that, but probably should have out of respect anyway. So the Muslims, as opposed to the ancient Egyptians, do believe in one God, in angels, that there's a day of judgment, that fate is preordained, And then what is always interesting to me in the Muslim countries is hearing that 5 o'clock call to prayer. And it's so foreign to me. It's so, I don't know, it almost gives you chills in a way. It's this call, this from the loudspeakers in the mosque at 5 o'clock, the call to prayer. And there are other times during the day too, but mostly because you're out and about, you're aware of it at 5 o'clock. This is the inside of the mosque. This was Baker, our guide for 4 days, and we're still friends with Baker on Facebook. We really liked him and have become quite good friends with him. Within the mosque, we met by a group of school children who wanted to practice their English so bad. They clustered around me. What is your name? What is your name? And I would tell them and ask them what their name was, and it was great fun. The Nile, we spent part of our time on the Nile, which was a source of life for the ancient Egyptians. And just a few facts about the Nile. It passes through 11 different countries. It's the longest river in the world. And it was just being in such a traditional site of really the source of life. Along the way, we saw the Philae temple, and this was to be going on a boat and seeing things like this from the shore was quite an experience. This is the land that looked like from the Nile, the boats, and the people on the Nile. We had one following our cruise ship, selling goods, showing his wares and showing things from his boat, trying to sell. I don't know how we ever would have bought it, but anyway, it was very interesting. Several different kinds of worship. One was a whirling dervish, and this man whirled for 20 minutes straight. And then he changed direction and whirled the other way and had lights on it and so on. It was pretty amazing. The ancient Egyptians worshipped all kinds of things, but one were the crocodile mummies, and they would mummify these crocodiles that were, I think they revered them because they also feared them in the river. And at night, it was just eerie to see the temples at night, the lights on them, the huge statues, the obelisks, and it was again awe-inspiring, the grandeur, the size. These are some examples of the hieroglyphics. There are 700 different symbols in the hieroglyphics language. So you can imagine they had capability of quite a story, but it was at the same time, it was, well, quite, I guess, good reading if you knew what the story was going to be. In some of the tombs, the color was so intense and so accurate. After 3,000 or 4,000 years, for those colors to be still preserved inside the temples, it was really something. And this was the home of I never can say it. Hatshepsut, who was the female pharaoh. And she was really quite an impressive leader. She was probably one of the better pharaohs, and she disguised her identity as much as she could. This tribute to her, this temple almost looks modernistic in its architecture. And of course, it's again, thousands, a couple of thousand years old, drop in the bucket, huh? I really appreciated this particular picture because to me, it indicated a whole lot about Egypt. For one thing, what you see is an ancient temple and on the top of it, a mosque. So there were so many things that were buried for so many years and conquered and built over and covered up, that this said a whole lot about the times and about Egypt itself, because it's still, so much is still being uncovered. Less than 1% has been discovered and excavated of ancient Egypt in Egypt, or of the ancient part of Egypt's history. We were in one spot and I asked another guide, so you're still discovering things, right? Which is a kind of a stupid tourist question, of course, being a stupid tourist. And he pointed over, he said, oh yeah, last week we discovered this Roman village right here. Well, my goodness. so much there of yet to be discovered. Well, and that brings to mind that Egypt has been in the news lately. For one thing, this was the ship that was blocking the Suez Canal for a couple of weeks, tying up the whole world trade organizations. It was just, ships were backed up for all that time, filled with cargo. And the size of this, if you look at those little dots up on the side, and I think this shows it, look at the comparison here of this piece of heavy equipment compared to the size of that ship. So Egypt, I understand, is suing the shipping company for $1 billion for the cost of the trade that it blocked. And also, this recently was, I think in the last week or so, this wonderful announcement of a whole new area, ATEN it's called. And this is a village that is equal to Pompeii. It's considered the city of gold, the Golden City. There are, in the bottom corner, there are probably dozens of sarcophagi, and imagine uncovering something like this. So Egypt has a whole lot to do. Yes, and our tour guide had a hand in that, our Egyptologist. So in closing, if you, like me, you're interested in history, Egypt is a place of wonders. It's the land of many civilizations, including Greek, Roman, Christian, and Muslim. And I know that forever, my life and my worldview will certainly be changed after seeing all that Egypt has to offer. No, I didn't see it all. I think I just saw just a whisper of it, a tiny glimpse of all that it has to offer. And my final adventure was to take a hot air balloon over the Valley of the Kings. And this was I was up at dawn on a hot air balloon, and we were way high up over the tombs, the temples, and we soared way. It was probably one of the most exciting experiences of my life. And so I share with you the whispers of the Middle East where faiths converge. And thank you so much. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I think I feel like I just barely scratched the surface, but I hope that that I gave you a little bit of a world view there, limited though it may have been. So happy to answer any questions, anything that you might, or anything that, observations.
Hey, Sandy, that was fabulous. I'm wondering if you could end the share screen, and that way we can all see each other.
Okay, good. Yes.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna stop the recording.